Okay, so welcome to the webinar, guys. I'm really excited that you're here. I called this webinar, What's Love Got to Do with It? And a friend of mine said, well, that's like a really weird name for like a Valentine's Day, relationship themed webinar. Why would you call it that? And the reason that I called it that is because very often we are addicted to this illusion of romantic love, and that has nothing to do with it at all. So when we talk about love, or I talk about love with a small L, I refer to that kind of romantic Walt Disney rom-com love, right? That we all love. It feels great, it feels good. But there's usually some drama tied up in it. And then there's love with a capital L, which comes from a really healthy place. And even that's where I would say divine love comes from. So anyway, welcome to What's Love Got to Do with It? That's the webinar. I'm Giovanna. And for those of you on the call that don't know me, I am a formerly trained alternative medicine doctor. And I am now a coach. I've been a coach for the last very long time, and in the business now for 14 years. And really for over the past 20 years, my fascination has been a couple of things. What makes people hurt and suffer, and how can they heal? And the reason that I'm so passionate about doing relationship work is because I grew up very much in a household with two parents who argued all the time, seemingly hated each other. I actually didn't know my dad really loved my mom until she passed away, which is kind of sad. They were yelling at each other all the time, and I vowed that I would never ever have a relationship like that. And of course, I grew up and had a relationship like that. So my passion for the topic has really come from my own very real experience with what I would call love addiction, romantic love addiction, and coming out the other side of it. In fact, I had to hit my relationship rock bottom and get into a really abusive relationship before I actually realized there is a problem here, and it's not them, it's me. And that's when I had to really hunker down and do the work. And in fact, it wasn't until a coach called me out on this very addictive kind of toxic pattern I had with really just wanting to fill myself up with the love and validation from outside of me, in particular from a man. That's when I realized, you know what? I think she's right. Something's wrong here. In fact, when I first heard the term love addiction, I thought she was just making it up, because how could you, like, of course, everybody loves love. Why wouldn't you be addicted to love? What I didn't realize is I was addicted to the illusion of romantic love, and that was somehow going to save me or fix me. And so I went through a lot of work, and I ended up going to the other side of that. I ended up going to a stage that I call Misindependent Syndrome. And that was a like, I don't need a man stage, right? I went all the way to that syndrome, and I became what I call manorexic. So I went from like just being like super needy and looking for the next fix, right? The next guy that, show me attention, that would find me sexy or want to be my boyfriend. I went from that to all the way to, right? So I just starved myself. And I woke up one day and realized this isn't sustainable either, because I am made for love and connection. That's one of my values. And I'm stripping myself from something that I really value because I'm afraid of it. So then I had to start doing the work to rewind all of that compensation, because all that was me compensating because I was afraid to get hurt again. And I had to do the work around that. And so now it is my absolute pleasure to work with women and some men who are ready to do that inner work around relationship. So today we're going to go through quite a bit of stuff. In fact, the workshop today is something that I do in 3+ hours live. So I'm condensing it all in today. I hope I can get to all the information I want to share with you guys. Because we're a small group, I am so open to questions. So if you guys have any questions, I want to point you below on your screen. There's a little chat window, at least there should be a chat window. And that chat window, when you open it up, should bring up a little window where you can type a question. Alternately, if you can't find the chat window, I will be pausing for questions, and I will unmute you, and we can go for it that way. So let's dive in. What are the 3 biggest dating mistakes? So I'm going to just unmute you guys and just find out, are we single ladies on the line today? Or are we relationship ladies?
Single.
Gail, you're single. Hadel, you're single too?
Yep.
Great. The single ladies are on the line. I love it. I love speaking to single women in particular. I mean, the women that I work with that are in relationship have other issues, but I love the single women. So here are the 3 biggest dating mistakes. And you guys are going to be like, what? That's a dating mistake? I didn't realize that. It's not what you're wearing. It's not the apps you're using. It's not even necessarily the guys you're agreeing to go out on dates with. So the 3 biggest dating mistakes, and I have them written down here so I don't forget my own wisdom here, is not knowing what you want. And that almost sounds like initially like, well, duh, of course that would, if you don't know what you want, you don't know who to go after. But this goes even deeper than that. So we're trained by several things. We're trained by our upbringing, consciously or unconsciously. Even if you had parents that had an amazing relationship, there's been some training there, right? There's agreements that your parents had in their relationships, and there's agreements to how your mom would be as a woman in a relationship and how a man would be in a relationship. So unconsciously, we pick up these ways of being through our upbringing. Then there's society, right? I mentioned Walt Disney and the rom-coms. Don't be surprised, but they have infiltrated our unconscious so deeply that we have convinced ourselves that this is what we want. So when I actually narrow this down with a woman to what they actually want, most women that I speak to, and I myself included, all they could say is, I don't know. Or I just want someone to have fun with, or I just want to be loved. Right? So there was really this void of what do you want? And so it's really, really important to know what you want. So often you will hear, a lot of people do this, I do this with my clients as well, is to make the list. And usually the list goes something like this. He's tall, dark, and handsome, right? He's got this job, he drives this car, he does this and that. And it's very kind of superficial level things. What I encourage my women to do is make the list that's a feelings list. And here's how that differs. When I'm with him, I feel fill in the blank. I feel more this way with him than without him. So you want all the feelings to come up in your list. And as I tell all my women, make the list and then burn it. And you're probably thinking, are you insane? You just told me to make a list because I don't know what I want. Well, yes. But you don't want to hang on to that list, because you do want to open up to the possibility that the universe is going to bring you someone who, yes, fulfills all those things, but they come in a radically different package. In fact, that's what happened with me, with my partner. He filled everything on my list, right? And he came in a different package. Like I was like, I want someone who's an entrepreneur as well, because I want to be able to travel the world. And, I don't want to be tied down to one location. And I had all these stipulations. But the most important factors that actually came to be was how he makes me feel, and the healing we've been able to do together, and how he shows up as a man and how I'm able to show up as a woman for him. And he came in a different package. And guess what? He works for an airline, so we could still travel around the world. So don't be so tied to the list, but make the list to know what you want and have it be a feelings list. So that's number 1. Number 2 is not knowing what to look for. So it sounds a little bit like number 1, except it's a little bit different. Often when I'm on the phone, in fact, I would say 10 out of 10 times, when I'm on the phone or I'm on a call or I'm working with a client, and we start talking about what a man in his masculine, like a really healthy masculine, looks like, how he shows up, how he makes you feel, how it changes you, all these different elements. The typical response I get is, there's people out there like that? Because that's the response I gave. I didn't even know these men existed. In fact, most of the men I dated in my early dating were much more, I would say, feminine. They were much more in touch with their feminine than their masculine. Well, later when I started doing the work, that was really obvious to me. My dad, God bless his heart, I love him to bits, had a bit of an anger problem, right? So I grew up with a rageaholic dad. So I learned that that's what the masculine looks like. I wanted nothing to do with that. So I kept attracting men who didn't have that going on, were more in touch with their feminine. But what would end up happening ultimately is I'd get frustrated and annoyed because they weren't showing up for me. I wasn't feeling that strength from them. And I was missing something, and I didn't know how to label that. Then I started dating the opposite man. And when it got to the point of really starting to, like I said, hitting my relationship rock bottom and being with someone super controlling and super toxic, super narcissistic, that's when I had to sit down and say, I don't have a model for what it is that I want. So if right now I said to you, I want you to go out and I want you to find a purple car with yellow polka dots and red stripes, you wouldn't know the first place to look because you've never seen a car like that before. You would have to start looking at different places where that car might be. So maybe I would have to draw you a picture and say, this is what you should look for. Maybe I'd have to show it to you in a magazine. Maybe you'd have to read a book where that car is described. Then you have a model for what you're looking for. So now your vision is opened up. Now when you're out in the world, when you're out on dates, when you're talking to people, suddenly you have a template in your mind and you could compare and contrast who's in front of you with what it is that's important, which is a man that is truly, truly healthy and that shows up powerfully as himself and in his masculine energy. And I'm going to say a little side note here. As I'm speaking about masculine and feminine energy, this is not gender specific. This has nothing to do with sexual orientation. I could replace the words with yin and yang, and they would be the same thing. We're talking about the energy of this. There's a lot of women who feel more comfortable in their masculine energy and they attract men that are in their feminine energy, and it totally works. What doesn't work is feminine and feminine, masculine and masculine, right? It doesn't work. You even see in same-sex couples where there is a polarity difference of how the energy is expressed, because in order to have attraction, we need polarity. So it doesn't matter if you're a woman who feels more comfortable in her masculine or vice versa, it's irrelevant. But it is finding where the true you sits, where the essence of you sits, not the piece that covered up everything, but the essence of you sits and what you require for attraction to exist with the other person. So it's literally like the pole ends of a magnet. Positive and positive do not attract. Negative and negative do not attract. In fact, the magnet will push away, it'll repel, right? It's the same with people. Negative and positive ends, they go together, right? It's actually the meaning of opposites attract. So it's not like you like apples and he likes oranges and like, whoa, we're in love. That's actually the meaning. It's actually a scientific polarity of positive and negative. So that is an aside. So that second big one is not knowing what to look for. So if you don't have a model of this type of man or woman in your life and you need to find one, look for them in famous people, right? Look for them in magazines. Read a book about someone who shows up that way. Get yourself aware of a model of the type of partner and partnership that you want to have, because as you get that model, you will start to know how to look for it. It's sort of along the lines of how people create vision boards. I'm not a big fan of the vision board. That's a topic of a whole other seminar. I'm not a big fan of the vision board. However, I am a fan of alignment. And I am a fan of aligning yourself through knowledge and wisdom and getting in touch with what you want. So find this model so you know when you're dating, your radar, right, could be looking for the right thing. The last thing is not understanding your value. So when I was dating, I was always looking for whether that person was going to approve of me. Is he going to accept me? Is he going to like me? Is he going to think I'm cute? Is he going to choose me? And there's a whole lot of women walking around waiting to be chosen. And unfortunately, what happens when you're waiting to be chosen is you are never in the power position of being able to make the choice. And you can't be in that power position unless you know your value. So there's a lot of talk about self-love, right? Self-love here, self-love there. It's a very wonderful concept, and I want you to love yourself. I want to love myself more. But it's a huge concept, right? So think about it. When someone says to me, well, Giovanna, you just need to love yourself more. It's like, great. Where can I buy some? Like, you know, it's such a big concept that it's often really difficult to wrap my head around. Well, what do you mean? How am I going to do that? Because I love myself in some areas, in some areas I don't. So I don't understand that. And what I came to learn is that more important than focusing on self-love is understanding your value. So here's a little exercise that you can do. Develop your relationship resume. And what that literally looks like is a list, a resume of where all your value is, your previous experience, what you bring to the relationship, what you bring as a person, just being in the room, right? Like, who are you? What do you bring? What is your value? Because it's not until you understand your value 100% fully, and you could say to a person or just to the world, to the air, you know what? I'm pretty awesome to be with. Like, my faults and I'm not perfect, but I would be an awesome girlfriend, or I'd be an awesome wife, partner, however you want to label it. And you really understand the value that you bring. Now you are not waiting around to be chosen. Now you are in the power position where, coupled with the other two steps that I mentioned, now you can choose, right? Now you know your value, you know who it is you're looking for and what you're looking for in them, and you know exactly what you want. And so now you can approach dating with, number one, just a lot more fun. Just relax the pressure of it all and not be focused on an outcome, but really just knowing your value, who you're looking for, and what you want puts you in such a position of power and even playfulness. So I use dating and dating apps as homework for my clients. It's actually really fun. It's one of the ways that I started to reclaim myself in the dating world and my relationships, is I started using dating as an experiment. I would go out with guys and I would try and apply these principles, and I would watch, what's happening here? Am I having this old feeling come back? Are they, acting in a certain way? Am I attracting the same kind of energy? Like, how do I feel right now? Am I feeling kind of needy? Am I feeling kind of choose me? Like, am I becoming that flirty little teenage girl? So it's a great way to actually put yourself on an experimental dating program. And I would definitely suggest you do this with the guidance of someone, but you can do it on your own as well. Applying these principles and starting to just practice. So it just lets the steam out of the dating circle. So now we talk about conscious relationships. So the funny thing about the term conscious relationships, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said to him, I was talking about, I want a conscious relationship, and I was explaining to him what I want. And he looked at me, and he's not into the new age speak at all, into the personal development. And he looked at me and he said, you want a conscious relationship? Like, you mean as opposed to being with a guy that's asleep all the time? And I laughed because I thought it was hilarious because he was being very literal about it. But then it got me thinking, actually, no, I don't want to be with a guy who's asleep all the time. And I don't want to be asleep all the time at the wheel in my relationship. So having a conscious relationship is all about being awake. It's about being awake to your triggers and the stuff that's going to come up for you, and knowing that your partner is going to be triggered and have stuff come up for him or her as well. So being conscious in a relationship and having a conscious relationship is really about staying awake to all the possibilities that this particular partnership brings your way. This is an earth school. I believe we're here to learn. I believe that our most concentrated laboratory for learning is our personal relationships. We are made to connect. We are made for relationship. So isn't it better, and wouldn't you rather be in a relationship where you are awake and conscious and working through your stuff, or in a reactive one where there's drama and stress and triggered emotions and reactivity, and it just ends up falling apart and blowing up? So conscious relationships doesn't necessarily mean, okay, let's put a stamp on it, this is going to last forever. It's not guaranteeing that, but it is guaranteeing that you are getting from your relationships and showing up and giving to your relationships in a way that is more sustainable, in a way that is more fulfilling and healthy. Because the fact of the matter is that we all, at some level, even if you had the Leave It to Beaver parents, we have relational trauma. It could be relational trauma that we picked up through our parents, could be any kind of abuse, neglect, scapegoating, right? Any kind of abandonment, rejection, all of that stuff that we experience when we're little, from ages 0 to 7, it stays in our cellular body. And it affects our nervous system. In fact, it impacts us so intensely that it registers as trauma. And that's called relational trauma. And you may have had that happen even if you had parents that had the most beautiful marriage ever, because even if it didn't happen between 0 to 7, you may have had a high school sweetheart that broke your heart. You may have had another really tumultuous, abusive relationship that, you know, kind of traumatized you in these ways. And the thing with relational trauma, because it affects our autonomic immune system, our autonomic system rather, nervous system, it stays in our body in a cellular level. And the only way to heal relational trauma is in a relationship. So it's kind of like you need a dose of the thing to help you heal the thing, right? I'm a trained homeopath. So we believe that a little bit of this cures a little bit of that, right? Like cures like. And it's very similar to that. So you can only heal this relational trauma when you're in a relationship. But if you're too afraid to go into a relationship and you have fears around being vulnerable and being seen and actually expressing your boundaries in a relationship, all of that is going to impact this healing. So my mission really is to help guide you through that in a more, let's say, productive way, right? So that you're not going through as much suffering, but rather you're able to heal this stuff and sustain your relationship. So a couple things around having a conscious relationship. I'm gonna look at my notes here real quick. So there's 3 elements to having a conscious relationship. So the first element is radical responsibility. So much like I mentioned earlier, you need to be willing to be radically responsible. And that means that I am responsible for everything I'm feeling. It's so much easier when we can blame the other person, right? It's so much easier. Yesterday, I had this thing happen where I was on the elliptical at the gym and I was like having a great time. And like I was 15 minutes in, I was just hitting my stride and I get a phone call that I had a delivery at my front door. So I had to go from one building in my complex to my building to get this delivery. And the elevators were out. And I was so mad. I had to take the stairs. I got locked in the stairwell. Like all this drama happened. And I was just fuming. I was really, really mad when I got inside. And I thought, okay, well, I could be mad and I could blame my building management. And I can blame the elevators and I can blame the power outage and I can do all this kind of stuff. And I could really stay in this fuzzy state of total anger, but I'm responsible for how I feel. So if I'm radically responsible for how I feel, I don't get to point fingers and say, it's because of you that I feel this way. It's because of you, because you're making me feel this way, right? We have to be able to take responsibility. Now, radical responsibility does not mean that the person gets let off the hook for everything, right? Radical responsibility means I'm going to take responsibility for my reactions and for my piece in this matter. But I'm also going to hold you accountable for what your piece is. The second thing that radical responsibility is not is blame. So sometimes when I say about being responsible for something, my client will think, oh, well, I have to take the blame for that. No, radical responsibility is such a higher vibration. It is you being empowered. It is you sitting on the throne of your queendom and saying, I see how I created this and I'm going to make it better. Taking the blame is becoming the victim. I can't believe I did this again. I can't believe I reacted like this. Oh my God. And like all of that energy where it's just really, you're just stabbing yourself, right? Like mea culpa, self-blame. That is not productive. And that is not what radical responsibility is. Radical responsibility is you being in the power play position with yourself and not being the victim to anything that is happening to you. Okay. Second thing is to identify and heal your relationship style. So for those of you that are on this webinar, you would have received a link to take your relationship style quiz, and you will by now hopefully know your relationship style. If you didn't get a chance to do that, there'll be a link in the replay email for this, and you can retake the quiz, or you can go to my website at giovannacaposa.com, and it's right there on the front, and you can just click in and take the quiz. It is a longer quiz though, so if you haven't taken it, just wait till we're done to go ahead and do that, because it'll take your attention away. So identifying and knowing what your relationship style is probably the thing that radically changed everything for me. So there's a book. I'm gonna tell you guys, I love to promote other people's things. I love to give credit where credit is due. And I love to really highlight masters of this and people that are doing this work. And so no joke, guys. Okay. Check this out. The relationship style quiz that you guys just took was inspired by this book called Attached. It's an amazing book. It radically changed my life, as you can see by all of the ridiculous amount of markers I have in here. I sobbed when I read this book. I just wept when I read that, and I'll have a link as well in the email for the replay, so you guys can go on Amazon and check that. I sobbed when I read that. Once I figured out what my relationship style was, it was a total game changer. I didn't realize that the way I was showing up for dating and relationship was all coming from this unconscious relationship or relational trauma and this style that I developed over years and years and years. So the validation that comes when you realize, number one, there's nothing wrong with me, right? I'm not needy. I'm not, I don't know, defective in some way, but actually I have this relationship style, right? This attachment style is how they term it in the book. And it's kind of this working mechanism in me. And it's in my nervous system. It's in my subconscious, and it gets triggered when my partner says this, or when my partner doesn't say this or doesn't do this. It gets triggered. So again, I could either react from that and be completely unconscious, or now that I'm conscious of it, I can actually learn to work with it. I can actually be empowered around this. And what it did for me is it gave me the courage to start sharing with my partners what my needs were. It gave me the courage to say, I have this going on, and I have a need for this amount of intimacy. Or I get really anxious or triggered when I feel you kind of pulling away, and I just want to check in with you. Now, when you're with the wrong partner, you're going to hear things like, oh, you're so needy. You're suffocating me. Too much, right? And oftentimes we as women get made to feel that we are the problem, right? We're the problem, and it's because we have an issue that this person can't deal with us. So I'm going to go into in a minute talking about how the relationship styles interact with each other, and that it'll give more clarity to that kind of response. But understanding your relationship style and really how comfortable are you with intimacy is going to radically change everything from you. It's really for you. It's really hard to say, well, you've got stuff to heal, but you don't have a starting point, right? If you don't have a starting point, and you need to go on a journey and you don't know what the end is and where you're starting from, it's really hard to go on that journey. And so I love using this quiz with my clients because it gives us a baseline of where they are and what they're dealing with. And they start to learn the lingo. They start to be empowered around, oh, so now when I get a call, I don't get a frantic, crazy victim call of like, oh my God, and I can't handle this. Now I get a call or a text that says, hey, my style's kicking up. This is what happened with my girlfriend. This is what happened with my boyfriend. Here's the scenario, blah, blah, blah. And then we know where to go from there. I know how to walk them through it, right? Because we now have a map of what's going on. So that's the second big one about having a conscious relationship, is really understanding and knowing your style. So the third big one is, and this will be for any attachment style or relationship style, having needs, right? Having needs does not make you needy. As a card-carrying member of the feminist movement, and having Misindependent Syndrome and just wanting to be self-sufficient and I can do it on my own, I don't need a man, right? All of that really denied me acknowledging that I had needs. Mostly because in my early years, like I just said to you, I heard, oh, you're so needy. God, you just want so much. So you're too much, right? And I didn't want to be that anymore because I was told that needy is wrong. Well, it wasn't until many years later that I had a coach and therapist actually say to me, being needy just means that you have needs that aren't being met. That was a revelation for me. So being needy was not this weird disease anymore that I had to cure myself or I was going to get kicked out of the feminist club. It actually meant I have needs here and they're not being fulfilled. Now, it's not necessarily up to you to fulfill them. Maybe it's up to me to fulfill them. But instead of labeling myself as needy, actually, this is just a sign that I don't have these needs being met. In fact, maybe I'm not even in touch with what my needs are. And maybe, just maybe, it feels too vulnerable for me to share what those are. And so I'm not even going to tell you. I'm not even going to share them. So that is the third part. There's probably a 10-prong approach to having a conscious relationship, but those are the three that I really want to leave you with. So radical responsibility versus blame, really knowing and understanding your relationship or attachment style and knowing how to work with it. And then understanding what your needs are and having the courage to be able to express them and have them fulfilled, because you are worth it. You are worth it. So I want to take a pause right here and just come up for air. I gave you guys a lot, and I want to take a pause and just find out where you're at, what other questions you might have, and we'll go from there. So let me move this paper aside and I'll just unmute you both, and you can jump right in, and then we'll just take whoever speaks first and take your questions.
I think this is all really valuable, and I love all parts of this, just because it's all about putting the power in my hands, which I love. You know how much I love that. But the strange thing is I'm having a conflicting feeling about it, because
Oh, are you almost done?
I've been on this journey for a little bit, and it kind of feels like I've done a lot of this and I'm still missing something.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Gail. That is actually the feeling that a lot of women have, and let's talk about that a little more if you're willing to, because I kind of had the same thing going on. I was like, for the love of God, I'm like, how many times do I have to work on this and get this kind of message? And I'm going to tell you right now, like, I'm with the most wonderful man I've ever met, and I still have crap come up, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like I teach this stuff now. Why is this coming up? This is a never ending cyclical thing. And here's what I find a lot. And I don't know if this applies to you, Gail, but I find this a lot. And I have a girlfriend of mine, and we talk about this all the time, because she's like, I'm so frustrated. She's like, I'm out there dating and I'm open, and I really do want, like, I'm ready, and I want to receive, and I want to be vulnerable. And I feel so ready. And I've done a lot of this stuff and nothing's happening for me. And one of the things that I see, and you tell me if this is true for you, one of the consistent things that I see happening for women such as yourself and like my friend and a lot of other people, is this issue around vulnerability.
Right.
And vulnerability is often the last frontier. So it's kind of like, yeah, I've done a lot of spiritual work and I feel like I'm open to a relationship and I don't know why it's not happening, and that kind of thing. And it, for me, what I've noticed time and time again is it boils down to where are you on the scale of being vulnerable, being comfortable with vulnerability and intimacy, being willing to be vulnerable, right? To be that openness, that true openness, right? And true openness is actually where safety is. And when I first heard people say this to me, like that being truly open and being 100% vulnerable is safe, I was like, you are nuts. That is not safe. That to me is like someone's going to come out and like strangle me from a corner. Like that does not sound safe at all.
Yeah.
But when it comes to relationship, that actually is your safety, because if you can get really comfortable with your own state of vulnerability and openness, if you could actually stand tall in that place of I'm open and I'm going to be vulnerable, and I'm okay if you reject me. I'm okay if you don't like this about me. I'm totally okay because I'm going to be open. It's a safer place for you to be in than I like, you're not going to hurt me. Like, I'm just going to, let me just wait and see. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm going to, and this takes up a lot of energy, right? The closure and the protection and the desire to just not get hurt again, which is like, it's a survival instinct. It takes up a lot of energy. But when you are really sovereign in yourself and in your own energetic state of vulnerability, and you're like, yeah, I'm open, right? You know who I always think of? I think of Mother Teresa, or I think of Alma. You know Alma, the hugging saint? She goes around hugging people. She is like open as open can be. She
Right.
just radiates love. She radiates openness. And that is a form of vulnerability, but there's strength in that. So I don't know if that resonates for you, but it might be the final frontier.
Sure. And I mean, to a certain extent, it does. I feel like I have been doing better with that in the last few months, in particular, especially with situation that I'm in, as you know. Um, I've kind of been forced to be that much more vulnerable and sort of open to people and being helped and all of those things. So that's definitely a factor in this. But I find the issue that I have is like the opportunity. Like I know everyone says like there's no men around, but like it's not like I'm dating. There's no one to date. And it's
Ah,
funny because I even take it as far as my new thing that I picked up like 2 or 3 years ago is I heard something or someone say, you should always just assume that whoever you're interested in is interested in you. It just takes all the guesswork out and makes it more fun. So I even do that. I'm just like, of course everyone's attracted to me. Why wouldn't they be? So it has made it more fun when it comes about, but it comes about
yep.
so seldomly that that's the part I feel like I'm missing. Like I feel like
Oh yeah,
obviously
you're
I'm
not in the
missing.
traffic.
Yeah, I'm not. Like I
Yeah.
have a story from the summer of 2019, I think, of like an encounter that was amusing and fun, but it was fun for like 10 seconds, and it's like very few and far between.
Yeah. So here that thank you for sharing that and being really open to that. If you're not in the traffic, um, it's not gonna happen, right? So this is like this is like one of the classic things. This was actually for me, this was a covert protection mechanism. I don't know if it is for you yet because we haven't explored that.
It
But
could be just you saying that was something.
yeah. So it's for me, it was a covert like mechanism because for I was single for 4 years before I met my
Mhm.
honey, and because I just had to dive into all this work because I thought clearly I missed something in all my training. So, but I was doing that for a while, and my friends were like, "You need to get out there and date, and you should be open to meeting someone." And la la, because you know, there's always someone and their grandmother and their great aunt who has advice for you, right? So
Sure.
I was hearing all of these things, and I kept saying the same thing, like, "Well, you know." I don't meet the guys. It's a kind of weird. Like I get my groceries delivered, so it's not like I'm going to meet them in the grocery store. And I was kind of on and off dating apps. I could go on for like a month, and then I get bored, and I'd go off. And it was a covert protection mechanism for me because here's the thing:
Mhm.
if you're not in the traffic, you can't say, "Well, I just don't meet the people," because
Mhm.
we're in a day and age, right? Like chronological age where we're not at high school anymore meeting people everywhere every day. If you especially if you don't work in an environment where there's like I don't know, a big corporate office, or you're meeting different people every day, or you're going to meet, it's very, very difficult to meet people. And if you're past
Mhm.
the age of nightclubbing it and
Right.
doing all those things, which I'm so past that age, it's
Mhm.
really, really hard to meet people. And this is where tools like online dating and asking your friends if they know anyone to set you up on a blind date, which some people may or may not like, but using your networks and actually getting in the traffic. This is a quantum physics principle, it's called particle flow. And particle flow basically in a nutshell says that as you put your intention and effort out there, all that is taken for the universe to come rushing in. So if I don't know, if I want to improve something in my business and I start taking little small action steps and keeping the intention alive, those action steps along with the intention are going to create what's called particle flow. And that particle flow actually is where energy starts shifting and changing, and you don't actually even realize, and before you know it, there's an opportunity. In fact, I know, Gail, that you're on your way to an international move and you're doing stuff, and I would venture to guess, because you shared with me a little bit about how it happened, that there was some particle flow involved. Like you kind of
Mhm.
had an intuition, and then you thought, oh, let me see, and then and that's it. And then if it's meant to be, things start to happen.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't recommend a dating app for you right now because I know you're going to be moving internationally in
Yeah.
the next few months. So,
Yes.
might be a put off when you go out on a date with a guy and say, by the way, I'm moving to China,
Yeah.
or,
For sure.
but you'll be more in the traffic while you're there. I'm sure you'll be surrounded by other, international teachers and people. And the one thing is, it can be really discouraging and it can be really scary. But if you're not in the traffic, you're not going to meet the person.
Sure.
That's all I'll say on that for now. But Hadel, do you have any questions before we move on?
I do, and actually, I just wanted to say sorry about the earlier
Oh,
interruption.
it's okay. No worries.
I'm on lunch break, and there's a few people around me, so I had to move for a little privacy.
It's all good. No, I unmuted you, and then it was my fault, actually, because usually I keep people muted, so not to worry at all.
Okay. So I took the personality quiz, and apparently I'm the avoidant type, which are you going to like go over what the types mean?
Just about to do that. But yeah, please ask your question, though.
So, okay. So my main issue is usually when I meet people, I tend to be kind of reserved with them unless they give me a reason not to be. And so that's been kind of like my roadblock to, I guess, meeting somebody, or the reason why I would say I'm single.
So you're protective. You're a little more protective.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
You could go ahead.
Okay, well, let me jump into it, and then I think it might clear things up a little bit.
Okay, perfect.
So I understand you got avoidant. Gail, did you also take the quiz, and what did you get?
I did take it. I actually took it twice because I wasn't sure it was right, but I got secure.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's go over each of the 3 types and how they kind of interact with each other. Because I think that'll really, really help you guys. So all of these types are basically the way we feel about intimacy. So for the anxious attached person, intimacy is something they love. They have a great capacity for it, but it also brings about anxiousness. So they tend to worry about their relationships a lot more. They tend to be the people that, oh my God, he didn't text me back right away. Maybe something's wrong. Or, early on in my relationship days, I was so happy. I was like convinced he was going to die in a plane crash because I was like, this is too good to be true, right? It's like, now I can laugh about it. But this is what happens when you have anxious attachment. That's my style. I actually have a blend of the 2 styles. I'll go into that in a minute. But anxious attachment is a lot of your energy goes into the relationship and worrying about the relationship, and really you're very sensitive to your partner's actions or inactions or things that they say. And intimacy is something you desire and you have a great capacity for, but it's also you're afraid because the primary wound in anxious attachment is some form of neglect or abandonment. Okay, so that's anxious attachment. Secure attachment is, again, great capacity for intimacy. You love being in a loving, warm relationship. Intimacy is just not threatening to you at all. You're very open and able to be intimate and caring and all of that. And the relationship is just, it is what it is. Like, you find a great sense of security in it. You're sharing successes with your partner, and you share problems with them. You're friends, right? You grow together, and there's really, just as the name suggests, there's a sense of real security. And your nervous system, right? We talked about the autonomic nervous system and how that stores trauma. Your nervous system in a secure relationship is like, just happy, right? Like you're at home with that person. An avoidant type is also someone that really craves intimacy. Sometimes we might look at an avoidant type and say, well, they don't want intimacy. Obviously, they're avoiding it. Actually, they do. Deep, deep down inside, they really, really want intimacy. But intimacy is a bit threatening to them. They worry they're going to lose themselves. They're going to lose their self-sufficiency. They're worried they're going to lose their independence. They tend to get like close to a certain point, and then it feels too much, and they like back away, they backpedal. They tend to keep their partner at arm's length because as much as they crave the intimacy, it's also threatening. So that feels safer to them. And the avoidant type comes from a baseline wounding of scapegoating or child parenting, right? Where there was the parent really relied on you to parent them, right? So there was a role reversal, or you had to grow up way too fast, right? You didn't get to have your childhood. And a lot of times it comes from that type of baseline wounding. And of course, I'm generalizing because there's intricacies in all of these. And then you have the mixed type. And the mixed type can go from avoidant to anxious or anxious to avoidant. And they are kind of like a mishmash of the two. And there's this internal kind of attachment battle that goes on within them. The cool thing about all of these styles, in particular the secure style, is the secure style, as it might suggest, is actually quite healing for the other two styles. So if you're anxious and you meet someone that is secure, chances are over the course of the relationship and over the course of you being, like I said, radically responsible, aware, and working with your style and understanding your needs and being able to voice them, as you're being conscious in that relationship and as you're healing, you can go from anxious to secure. Same might happen if you're avoidant. Now, the little tweak in all of this that kind of sucks is that there's very, very few secure people, like actually naturally secure people in the world. They're less, let's say, than the other two combined. So what does that tell you about the state of our nervous system? What does that tell you about the state of our relationships and trauma? To me, it says a lot about the state of the world, because I have a higher sort of view about healing relationships that I think if we heal at the relational level, we could actually heal the whole world. That's a whole other webinar. But what ends up happening, unfortunately, because there are so many anxious and there's so many avoidant types, and they kind of attract each other. They attract each other because they have a similar and opposite wound. And if you're not conscious enough as an anxious person or an avoidant person, you will tend to draw in the person that brings out that very worst in you. And so oftentimes I will hear my anxious clients attract an avoidant man. And I hear things like, why is he emotionally unavailable? You know, he's so standoffish, or he keeps me at arm's length. He won't get close to me. Same as if it's a man and it's a woman, or woman and woman, it doesn't matter. My partner is kind of keeping me at arm's length. I can't get close to them. They won't be vulnerable with me. I don't feel connected to them. And what this does for the anxious partner, male or female, is it kicks up all of their anxiety. Because remember, we said that the anxious person is really hyper acutely aware and sensitive to everything that goes on with their partner. This is a survival instinct that we developed as children that experienced abandonment and neglect, because that was a survival issue as a child. If I'm abandoned or neglected as a child, I could die. So my nervous system as a child learns to be hyper alert and hyper aware and scanning my environment for danger. That's just what happens. So that anxious attached person is hyper vigilant, and they are always watching. So if they are with someone who is avoidant, they're going to pick up on all of their standoffishness, all of their like, too intimacy, too close, I don't know, and it's going to trigger them. The same goes with the avoidant person who is with the anxiously attached person. Because think about it, that anxiously attached person will want to get closer, right? This is the typical, when we talk about like the cat and dog, right? The cat and mouse kind of game that people play, the push-pull. This is the dynamic that's happening. So if you're an avoidant person that's with an anxious person, initially it might feel all great, right? Because you both want the same thing and you both want to be intimate, and they're showing you a lot of attention and they're really into you. And so you kind of feel good and you feel good about yourself, but then they get to be too much. And then you kind of feel a little suffocated and you feel like they're too needy and you feel like, and so you want to push them away, and that starts to create the same dynamic. Do you see how that works? And so then it's another push-pull cycle and dynamic again, because you're feeling suffocated and you're feeling like your independence is being threatened. You might even feel like this person's trying to control you. They're too needy, right? And then you start to pull away. And really what's happening is it's just your relationship style that's being activated. So there's a way that you can learn to work through that and work with that in order to find some equilibrium with yourself in that relationship. Now, eventually, as you do this work with your relationship and attachment style, and as you start to heal, you know, all these little layers of things, eventually you can attract someone secure. And you will do the work in the relationship with each other that will bring you more to secure, whether you're coming from avoidant or anxious. So, and then you could be a combination of the two. I remember my early years of dating, I was very avoidant. And then I had a couple of relationships where I became anxious, and there was this melding of the two. So there is actually a way that you can kind of have both things come up. But the important thing to know here for you guys watching is that none of these styles are you. None of them are you. None of them mean you're broken. None of them mean that something's wrong with you. They're not you. They're just something that you picked up along the way as a survival mechanism. And all it takes is reprogramming that autonomic nervous system to find safety where we know we can rely on safety. And so that's part of when I do inner child work with people. One of the things I always say is that our job is to learn how to reparent the child within, right? Most of us are just scared little kids walking around dressed up as adults. And we can pretty much have most people fooled. But I'll guarantee you that if you're not happy in your relationships and you have triggers coming up, or there's drama or even lack thereof, that there's some scared little girl behind the wheel of that car and she might not be able to reach the pedal, but let me tell you, she's doing her damnedest to drive that car right off a cliff for you. And it's not you, but there is a way that you can be empowered to work around it. So that's all I have for you guys today. There is 5 minutes left. I want to be really respectful of your time because this is a lunchtime webinar. I want to take the last 5 minutes for any more questions. Hadel, you might have a question now that I explain the styles. You might want some further clarification for yourself. That's totally fine. If we go over a few minutes, if you have to go, no worries. But I do want to be respectful of the time. So do either of you have any questions? You can unmute yourself and we can go there.
I think I was initially, like, I guess I've done a lot of work and tried and healed a lot of this, which I guess is why I'm a secure type, because I do kind of feel that way. But a lot of time when things sort of creep up on me, I'm an anxious attachment person, or at least initially I was. Because sometimes it's like, things creep up on you, and the hypervigilance and being really aware and stuff is something that's like really, innate and just, something that I really draw from and I can fall back into very, very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say you probably have a baseline of anxious, but because you've done work and you've been doing, you can stay in the secure. Like I can live in the secure for a lot longer than I used to, right. But I still have anxious stuff come up. So you could be an anxious secure, right? So one of the things I want to let you guys know is none of these things are finite. Right? So it's like if you're anxious now, or you're avoidant now, or you're secure now, I mean, more so if you're secure, you tend to be like that for your whole life, but that doesn't mean stuff's not going to come up. Right? So, we evolve, we change, and you can be a blend of the two. So yeah, it sounds like you probably had an anxious baseline, Gail, and that may or may not come up in your next relationship because it's there. But you've been in the secure for so long that, it's kind of like a 60-40 or like a 70-30 kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Hadel, did you have a question?
Okay, so I guess as an avoidant type, the hardest thing for somebody who identifies with that type is vulnerability. Like I know I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
So I really liked what you said, which is, take one step at a time, right? So I guess the best thing for me going forward, although it's really hard, is just, taking it one day at a time, just practicing to be more vulnerable.
Yeah, and the funny thing with vulnerability is when we have an issue with vulnerability, it's because we say that, like, I feel like I want to be safe with you. Yeah. Right? So we give the power over to the other person to say, you're safe with me. You can be vulnerable with me. Okay. It's actually the reverse. So with the work to do around vulnerability is it safe for me to be vulnerable? In other words, if I don't know, if I have a project that I'm really excited about and I go and share it with my sister, right? And my sister's like, oh, that sucks. Why would you do that? That's so hard. You're probably going to fail. Like, that's going to cost so much money. I can say, oh, like I vulnerably went to her and she totally shot me down, which I can still say that's a shitty thing to do. However, if I'm really comfortable with myself and my own vulnerability, I can be like, yeah, I'm never coming to you again with something like that. That's just, I'm not doing that again. Right? Yeah. But I'm okay that I shared that, your judgment of me, your words that you said to me, they didn't affect me and how I feel. That's a reflection of you. But I feel safe in my vulnerability because I know I'm happy with this project. I know I'm excited about it. So I'm okay in here. So this is where vulnerability, sometimes we reverse it and we think, well, I have to be like, the other person has to make me safe and then I can be vulnerable. No, you have to be safe. Right? Does that make more sense?
It definitely does. Yeah, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, so just flip it.
Yeah, it first begins with you, and then you're extending that comfort, I guess.
Yeah.
And you're not really giving the other person, you know, the responsibility of cutting it off or, you know, making it easier for you.
I'll give you an example, a dating specific example. I was dating someone very casually when I first read this book, Attached. And I really started doing this work around my attachment style. And I realized that my relationship style was anxious, right? At the time I had gone through some other, like, I was avoidant my whole life. And then I had 2 relationship traumas that, like, I triggered my anxiousness, right? This is why I know it's a dynamic, it can change. But I was dating this guy and he was just the soaking wet definition of an avoidant. Like, I swear to God, I could have checked off every box. And I recognized that, right? I recognized that he was avoidant, that he was pushing me away and that he was doing this. And because I got to such a place of confidence with understanding myself and knowing that I'm okay and knowing that I have needs and the needs don't make me needy, I actually was able to have a conversation with him and say, you know, I'm noticing that you're behaving this way. And I really want to share with you that that's triggering this in me. And I'm feeling like you're not interested. I'm feeling like probably I should move on. And I want to check in with you to see if that's what's really going on with you. Because I'm feeling really anxious on this end because I don't know when the next date's going to be. And I don't know if you're going to text me back or call me. And you're being really standoffish. And that doesn't work for me. I need to be with someone that is really accountable and aware. And if you don't have time to date me, then that's okay, but you just need to tell me. I would have never had that conversation with anyone before. I would have never, ever had the courage to say that because holy crap, that's really vulnerable, right? Because in the past, guys would be like, oh, you're just too much, right? Like, get off, right? I would have never had the courage to say that in the past. But because I was okay with me, right? I understood my values. I understood what I wanted. I knew how I knew me. And I was okay to say, I'm not broken, right? That I could express that to this person, right? And it didn't matter how he took it. In fact, he took it really surprisingly well. He validated how I felt. He was very supportive. But it didn't matter. Like, his response didn't matter because I was okay to say that. Is that a good example to kind of get what I mean by this?
Definitely does. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So the working on vulnerability, it starts with you feeling okay with you.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions around that, or?
I just have a comment about that. When I started to think a little bit differently about vulnerability, I'd sort of read things and came across things, and I like the whole, I want to live my life on like the tree branch. And what I mean when I say that is, if the tree branch breaks and like I'm the bird perched on the tree branch, I'm going to be fine because I can just fly away. Like, I have the confidence in myself and my strength and all the things that have to do with me, that it's okay if the branch breaks.
Yeah.
I'm good. And I kind of liked thinking about it that way because it was way more empowering, and it just put a lot of the onus on me, which I appreciate can be scary at first, but it's about knowing that people can react and respond any way they want, but I'm okay because I'm strong enough to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great metaphor. Yeah.
I really like it.
It's beautiful. Yeah. Hadel, I would even say anything by Brene Brown. She does a lot of work on vulnerability and talks about it a lot. If you want to, you Google her TED Talk, and there's a lot of really great books she has around vulnerability. And the thing is, again, this is a part of a societal belief thing too. Like, we're not really taught to be vulnerable because vulnerability usually is a word that means to us means like you're weak, or you know, you're vulnerable to threat, right? You're vulnerable to attack. And it's so we have such a backwards way of thinking about it. But when it comes to relationships, the only way that you can really be you and be there and have a healthy relationship is if you really can allow yourself to be vulnerable, right? And I have to say this, when you are with the right person, you're safe to be vulnerable. So if even as good as you feel about your vulnerability, Hadel, and you're going to do this work and you're going to get stronger and you're going to just be good with you, if you meet someone and they're not okay with it, right? Or you share something vulnerable with them and they judge you, or they, you know, like the example with my sister and like making a comment or whatever, then you know, I'm not safe here. And I don't have to change my level of vulnerability and sharing, and I don't have to change who I am. It just means that you're not for me, right? So I'll never share that with you again. Brene Brown says that vulnerability, like people have to earn the gift of your vulnerability, right? And if they show you that they can't handle it, then you choose not to be vulnerable with them again. Not because you're afraid or because you're threatened or unsafe, but because you're like, this is a little jewel I have in here. And if you don't want to take it and respect it, I'm just going to keep it to myself, right?
Okay,
So, yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So I want to leave you guys with one last thing. And this is something that I had a counselor or coach, I forget what she was, therapist. It was so many years ago. She said this to me and it's guided my way, and I want to leave it with you guys. She said to me, you are constantly being the box and you're making the man or the romantic partner the jewel. And you need to start flipping that and remembering that you are the jewel and he is the box. And those words stuck with me. And I'll tell you right now, the relationship that I'm in, he's definitely the box and he makes me the jewel every day. And you are worth doing this work for. You are worth being loved. You deserve to be adored by the right person. And I always say, not because you found the one, right? Like all the rom-coms, I found the one. No, it's because you did the work and you became the one. And that's the most important piece. So because you guys stayed on with me this long, I know we went over time. I want to be respectful of that. For everyone that's on this call or listening to the replay, I want to offer them a completely no obligation coaching call with me. It's a 1-hour session. We'll do an assessment of where you are. We'll talk about your relationship style, and we'll dive into a whole coaching session around that. If it's not something that you feel like you can use right now, maybe you're already happy or you're just good doing the single thing, that's fine. You can gift it to someone. You can give it to someone on your behalf. And if you haven't already done the relationship style quiz, go ahead and do that. Thank you everyone for being here on the replay, and those of you that showed up live and on time, I really super appreciate it. And I wish you guys the best Valentine's Day, whether you're single or not, it doesn't matter. It's a day to celebrate love. Have a listen to my podcast episode this week on the history of love. I think you'll find it really cute. Bye guys. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Giovanna.
Thanks so much, Giovanna.